Well, good evening or good afternoon. I'm Bruce Hawley. I'm with the Circus Historical Society, and welcome to the Circus Historical Society Circus History Live program for this month with Wini McKay and Chester Cable from LA Circus. And now here's your host, Chris Berry, Vice President of the CHS. Chris?
Thanks, Bruce. You know, I'm so excited about this edition of Circus History Live to be speaking with Wini McKay and Chester Cable. Wini, of course, founder and director of LA Circus, which is part of the Los Angeles Foundation for Circus Arts. Native of Los Angeles, she knows the city back and forth, but she also loves its culture and its arts, and definitely the circus. She started as a performer, and we're going to hear about that a little bit with people like Dorothy Herbert as her mentor, the great equestrian, and also under the eye of Big John Strong, who is one of those well-known West Coast circus producers of the late 20th century. Wini is also a Guinness Book of World Record holder, and we're going to hear about that a little bit. And she's traveled all over the world performing. Celebrating more than 70 years in show business, Chester Cable has proved that some things really get better with age. I think so. Because like Wini, he's been in the Guinness Book of World Records twice. He actually beat his own personal record, and he has performed all the way around the world. Native of Pennsylvania, ran away to join Toll Brothers Railroad Circus back in the 1940s, which we'll hear about. And he's traveled all over the United States with a number of circuses too. So I want to kind of jump into it because this couple has done things outside of the normal circus business. They have been involved in movies. They have been involved in television shows, The Greatest Showman, Water for Elephants, Circus of the Stars, and they're very active today. So Wini, Chester, welcome to Circus History Live.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, you know, I've kind of given the little introduction here, but before we get into it, Chester, I want to kind of talk a little bit about you here and tell me about, like, how did you get started as a performer, and how about running away at the age of 16?
Well, when I was 17, I ran away from home and wound up, me and a neighbor wound up in Kansas City, and Cole Brothers, we saw a small ad in the paper that Cole Brothers are looking for help. So we wound up ushering on the Cole show. I think this was 49, because that spring, we were there in about the middle of the season, I believe, because the spring by Bert Lancaster was on the show, and he wasn't there when I joined. And then the Concalino's sister named Coral had taught my ex-partner ladder balancing and Grizzly. So they went on to they went back to Allentown after the season, but Louis Bogert was my partner, and he did foot juggling and Grizzly, but he was mainly taught by them.
You know, Chester, anybody who's seen a foot juggling act knows that it requires a lot of split timing, a lot of strength too. I have a video that I'd like to show here of you not too long ago. I think you were probably maybe about 70 years old or so, performing at Venice Beach in California. And I want to tell the people who are on the phone here, or who are watching with us, that Chester normally kicks that table up really high, and the ceiling I think is a little bit low in that trailer that you're performing in. But let's take a look at that video. You could roll that, Aileen. Need a little audio? We'll try it again. So as is sometimes the case, get a little bit of a technical glitch there, but we'll get that straightened out. So how did you get started with this idea of foot juggling? I mean, obviously you had somebody who was your friend, your partner, who was able to sort of encourage you, it sounds like.
He also taught me foot juggling, because Grizzly is similar, I mean, but
so tell us the difference between the two, between Grizzly and foot juggling.
Grizzly used a human being back in the, I don't know, 1900s. a German named Risley kicked the first double somersault and caught him, not passing, but on feet to feet, not feet to feet, but feet to Pratt.
And I think it was his son that he used
The
as
people in the
his,
business that I know, they called human beings Risley and foot juggling, foot juggling. The French have another word for it, antipodus something or other.
so
But I
do you have that
put the
video ready?
table up
ready?
on end, I need
Antipodus.
17 feet.
Let's see if we can get this and hear the presentation.
Our next act used to perform right out there. No, it's not Shamu the killer whale. There used to be a pier in this spot built in 1910, complete with a carnival and roller coaster and water slide and all kinds of stuff. And this guy performed there in the 50s. So this is his historical return to Venice Beach. Ladies and gentlemen, Chester Cable. Ladies and gentlemen, Chester holds a world's record for juggling this table with his feet. It weighs over 130 pounds.
Great.
That is fantastic. So Chester, over 100 pounds. I mean, and you took that act all over the world.
Yes.
Amazing.
Well, I was also with the Globetrotters off and on for 8 years.
And you know, I want to talk about that a little bit too, and also all the different circuses that you've traveled with throughout the United States and throughout the world, because I know the two of you spent a lot of time in Japan too. But Winnie, you know, you're somebody that you weren't born into the circus. You weren't a teenager who ran away. Tell us about how you got interested in this.
Well, it always starts with a guy, doesn't it? I know. I met somebody at what was that show? Miller Johnson that was at the Coliseum on my way to college. And then kind of I went there and for some unknown reason, elephants were just standing there by themselves, which is like, now that I realized how stupid I was, I walked up to them and then I kind of just went, wow, this is pretty cool. And then I just, you know, got involved there and now it's now. You know,
so you know, as you were a young woman who was interested in the circus, I mean, you know, you were in your 20s at the time. Tell me about how you went up to Jungle Land and how you know, kind of got to know Dorothy Herbert and people like that who were sort of mentors to you.
well, I went to Felipe's because a friend of mine was a advanced guy on the.
That's a restaurant in the
Sorry.
Chinatown neighborhood of Los Angeles.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they always had Paul Eagle Circus Luncheon Club, which circus people met there on Mondays, and huge amounts of people would come, like, 30, 40 people in the old days, because a lot of circus people lived in LA. I mean, you had Bobby Yerkes, you had the Guyonas. I mean, just really a lot of people lived out here and came to Felipe's. But anyway, so I met John Strong there, and he said, well, you ought to come out to Jungle Land and learn trapeze and da da da. So I went out to Jungle Land, and I was just so lucky to meet Dorothy Herbert. And she kind of there was 2 or 3 of us girls, and she took us and taught us trapeze. And I mean, what a gift. I mean, I don't think I knew
Dorothy
how cool
Herbert
it was
was
then.
one of the great equestrians of the American circus, starting really in the 1930s, and then her act when she could no longer ride, she did horses, she did birds, she did dogs, and she taught you all of those things, right? And trapeze.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, and there was 3 of us that started, and I think, Chris, as we discussed before, the one thing she was adamant about was clean feet in the air. I mean, she'd
Tell me
point
about
her
that.
toes. She would say, nothing's worse than a dirty foot in the air, and a big dirty foot, because the other girl was with us had kind of really big feet, and not to mention any names. I don't think she's still around, but anyway. But that, I mean, Dorothy was completely adamant about that, and I've instilled that in every aerialist that's ever worked with us. Be sure your feet are clean, So, in those days it was the bottom of the tights, but nonetheless.
So,
Anyway, like I said, I didn't know how lucky I was to be involved with Dorothy Herbert, and we remained friends until she passed.
and the two of you actually met on a circus, right?
On John's show.
Yeah.
On John Strong Circus. And of course, again, John Strong, one of the very well-known circus producers on the West Coast in California. And it wasn't a large show, but it was a show that people really enjoyed working for, right?
So many people started there. Anthony Gatto. I mean, he was a starting place and the finishing place for many, many acts. I mean, like, what was the guy's, the roper? Frank Dean and Bernice. I mean, people that the really old acts were there, and then also really, really young people. So it was kind of cool.
And you went up, you performed up in Canada with Gattini up there too, right?
After we left John's show, then we went to Mid-America, which was a really interesting show owned by Bob Tripp, Big John Strong, and Parley Bear. So again, we got to travel with Parley and Ernie, and Parley and I, and all of us, Parley remained our really, really good friend till he passed. I mean, what a treat to have him in your life,
And
he was
you're
on that
referring
show.
to Ernie as Ernestine Clark, who of course, what just for people who may not know, again, one of the great families in American circus history. I guess it was her grandfather, Ernest Clark, was the first to do a triple somersault in the United States.
Right.
So one of the great circus families.
And
So
Ernie,
so you're traveling around, you're doing all these shows. You mentioned the Harlem Globetrotters, Chester. Tell me a little bit about what that was like, because you were there for many years.
Well, I mainly filled in for acts that had problems. Like
in the beginning.
Simone Finner hired an Iranian act during the Iranian crisis, and he got hung up in England. They wouldn't let him come to the United States, so they flew me in. I wasn't working at that time. They flew me into Halifax, and I'd stay for a month or two. Then I had other fares booked or whatever. So and then another time they flew me to South America because what's his name? Ashton.
No, don't go there.
Well, yeah. Anyway,
he made an obscene gesture at the audience when
because he
missed
dropped
something.
the cylinder. Then he made a stiff arm to the audience, and then they flew me in to replace him. Anyway, I used to fill in for acts that got in trouble.
But then we also just remained there. What happened? We were with Earl Tagey's show, TNT, Tim Tagey's dad.
Some of you know Tim Tagey, his father's circus.
So we were in Anaheim Anaheim or Westminster, something in California. And then Marie Lenahan, the lady that was in charge of Harlem Globetrotters, and Simone Finner, which was a very unique agent. Anybody that knows her knows how unique she was. And that's when they hired Chester and I for the Harlem Globetrotters to do whatever. Very seldom did I work, mostly just Chester worked it. But then we
You
went all
know-
over South America and Central America and Australia, New Zealand. I mean, it was a really cool opportunity.
No, Europe, because the European acts were working cheaper at the time,
They have plenty of people in Europe. They didn't need us.
you know.
Well,
But-
you know, we talked a little bit about some of the other shows that you were on. One of the great for early truck shows, Mills Brothers Circus, was sold and became James Brothers. And I know you were involved with
Right.
that too, right? Cable, tell us a little bit about that, Mr. Cable.
Well, we did a couple shows that fall, and then the tent was pretty ragged. There was so much repair work to do that I didn't go back the next season. I went, I don't know where I went, what show I went.
It was
I
before
went
my
on
time,
another
way
show.
before my time.
And then the following season, I wound up on that show. But then he got a new tent, but I was there off and on for, I don't know, 10 years.
Tell me a
Herbie
little bit
Weber
about
was
that.
on it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Tell me about the evolution of that James Brothers. I know that they got some bad reviews or something, right?
Well, he got one bad. Oh no, he got another bad review, and he got two different bad reviews. One in he was sponsored by the PAL, the police department, police athletic. I don't know it's called PAL in San Francisco. They used to play the Cow Palace, some big dates, but he ran a phone promotion. He really didn't. Starting out, he didn't know much about a circus, but he could raise the money for one, you know.
So somebody came up with the idea to change the name, right?
Yeah, well, later on, after he was on the road for almost 2
You
years.
said Buckles came up with it, right?
Yeah, when Buckles was on the show, which was several years later, then he suggested they call it George Matthews Great London.
George Matthews, Great London. That was Sid Kellner, right? Who had that?
Yeah.
Who had that show? You know, these are some of the names today. You know, 30 years later, 40, actually closer to 50 years later. You know, they may not be as remembered as much, but they're so important to circus history because of the fact that they did employ many of those acts, including you and Buckles Woodcock and so forth. But in about 1977, something came along that really changed the trajectory of your life, and it was a program on CBS television, right?
Yeah.
Circus of the Stars.
Yeah.
So you were there the entire run, right? 1977 till 1994.
Well, when he booked the action, I only worked at one season with that the show called Give Me a Break with Laura Jo Miller
As an act.
as an act.
But we were there the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so tell me about that. I mean,
backdrops or whatever.
for those of you who don't recall, Circus of the Stars was a program that CBS put on starting in 1977, really as a way to promote some of the performers who were on their primetime programs.
Right.
ABC did the same thing with Love Boat and Fantasy Island, but at CBS, they decided to do it with circus acts. And so you had to train these people, right? I mean, to actually be able to do the trapeze and so forth. And some of the greatest names in show business at the time.
But like Bobby Urquis was one of the main trainers, the Farfans were, and Richie Guyona was very involved. I mean, they brought in trainers, Doug Terranova with the Cats, and I forget who did Elephant. Gary and Kerry did it one year, you know, of
It
course.
was different what people
Yeah,
did.
they used different people every year, and it was really fun because everybody stayed at Universal, you know, everybody with their, you know, on the back lot of Universal Studios. So they would barbecue and party. I mean, it was really a fun time in California circus history. You know,
And
because
plus
there was
you
people
were
out on
exposed-
the East Coast.
So do you have any recollections of any specific, you know, what we would call television stars who really took to the circus?
I remember the first year we did it, Charo was on, and remember they had those sea lions?
Oh, yeah.
And the sea lions, and they were all hand cued. And she started doing her Charo thing and moving around like really fast in her hands and her feet and everything. And the sea lions just looked at her and left. I mean, flat out just cut out the back door. And it was then it wasn't at in Vegas. It was in Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. And they just ran for the parking lot. They took one look at her and went, damn, they were out of there. But
And the great comedic actor Leslie Nielsen, didn't something happen to him too?
yeah, he was supposed to move his head like it was, I think it was Rosaris. It was a really cute actor. It was a horse with a carriage, and he was supposed to push on this piece of wood like a flat piece of wood, and it would pop up like this, and you move your head. Well, he forgot to move his head and just smashed his nose in. And he had on this purple tuxedo with blood everywhere. Luckily, they had
Wow.
another one. They took him to the hospital and reshot. And
Wow.
when Chester shot it, the producer, who was Bob Stivers, you tell him.
Well, anyway, Bobby Yerkes was doing Risley ahead of me with, I forgot who now, but he missed 2 or 3 times. So I was coming up a few acts later. So when Stivers wasn't busy, he said, I went over and said, am I supposed to do this in one take? He said, God damn, I hope so. I said, I bet you 100 I do. So anyway, I did everything right, except at the end, she walks forward. I'm supposed to follow her, and I forgot to follow her. And I said, oh shit, I screwed up. And he had somebody ran out on the floor and give me the $100 bill before I even left.
And it was a really complicated act. I think that's what we
Oh
forgot
yeah,
to say.
I mean,
It was the Chinese tables that go up 10 tables. And, you have to have these big poles to put them up there. I mean, it's like a 5
a lot of
people
rehearsal.
production. Yeah, it took a huge amount of rehearsal
in fact, I rehearsed that for 3 months in Allentown.
in Allentown, Pennsylvania,
Wow.
With that Laura, because that Laura Jo Miller, that young kid, she lived there.
from Give Me a Break. And it was, she was on with, what was that? Anyway, it was a cute show. It was a very popular show then.
And just to mention, Bob Yerkes, who one of the great trapeze artists and stuntmen, really, in circus history. Again, late part of the 20th century, and he gave a lot of people, including he got, I know, Rich Gaona into stunt work. Really well known in the Hollywood fraternity there also.
Darlene Williams, Nobi. I mean, just so many people he started in the business and graciously. And still does a bit, I mean, he's definitely older now, but he's still active, but not as active.
Sure. And again, Bob Yerkes was, he was one of those guys back in the 1950s, especially who, with Faye Alexander and others, did fantastic flying trapeze. But I want to kind of fast forward a little bit, because when Circus of the Stars ended, and, I guess all good things do eventually, it really gave you the opportunity to start something new. And that was LA Circus. So how did that get going? What was it? And then we're going to talk a little bit about what it is today.
Okay, well, LA Circus wasn't really a byproduct of Circus of the Stars. It just happened to be that it was good timing, because we got all the wardrobe, we got, or most of it. And it was really good wardrobe made by EC2, which is a Bob Mackie company. I mean, serious stuff. But LA Circus actually started with Doug Lyon, and he brought me on board. I brought Dick Mundy on board. We all kind of came together. And then, as all nonprofits do, part of those fade away. And now we have LA Circus, and Tom Conley is really an important part of it. He's like the right hand, I'm the left hand. He knows everything. And then we have a cool board of directors: Lee Maloney, Patty Munion. We still are very active. And our company, Chester Mines Company, Dorton's, supports LA Circus. So that's how it keeps functioning.
And this is, again, going into parks and teaching kids circus skills and things like that also, right?
Exactly. But the Circus of Stars stuff, then they stored it for about 2 or 3 years. And then they were like, this, because it went 19 years and Procter & Gamble pulled out, and they really thought it was going to go the 20th year. It didn't. And everybody was kind of weirded out that it didn't. And so they stored this stuff for a few years, and they said, you guys want to come pick it up? We're like, okay. So we picked it up. Now what do we do with it? And then that was just the beginning of Tim Kettle, who was, a major entity there. He said, come pick it up. And we did. And really, we never looked back since that. We just kept collecting circus stuff. And now
that's what I want to show the people who are on the line now. We have another video that we're going to show. We're going to take you to the Inland Empire of Southern California and show you the quarters of LA Circus. So if you could roll that, Aileen.
LA Circus has provided the props for Water for Elephants, HBO's Carnival, and most recently a photo shoot for Wayne Schoenfeld's 3 books on 1940s circuses. The owners, Chester Cable and Wini McKay, former circus performers and Guinness Book of World Record holders, have survived for 20 years in their Pedley location.
I'm the founder director of LA Circus, and we also have a prop house here in Riverside. And our prop house in Riverside is the largest collection of vintage carnival and circus equipment in the world. That's in a private collection. Of course, there's museums in Wisconsin and all over the East Coast that have circus projects, like they have giant wagons and stuff like that. But we have all the props that are needed to make a circus or carnival movie.
I've been a foot juggler for 70-some years. Not quite that long, probably 60 years, I guess. Was on a dozen different shows and worked fairs. I was with the Globetrotters as a part of a halftime show, off and on for 8 years. And I'm in the Guinness Book for juggling, foot juggling, a 130-pound table, kicking it end over end for 30 times in I forget how many seconds. But that's what I'm in the Guinness Book for.
Like the past year, we've been quite busy. We just finished a shoot with Wayne Schoenfeld, which is called Circus of the Heart. It's part of a 3-part trilogy, and they're the most beautiful photos of vintage circus. What he does is he takes pictures